Hi, my name is Nora, and I'm a 19-year-old college student living in Seattle. From the outside, my life may look normal, classes, homework, a small group of friends, but the truth is, my story is anything but ordinary. It all started with the passing of my father and an inheritance that would change everything. When I was 13, my parents got divorced. It was messy and confusing, and although my mother, Rachel, tried to protect me from the worst of it, the emotional distance between us only grew. She was always busy, distracted, and after a while, I just stopped trying to connect. Then, a few years later, my dad died unexpectedly. I was devastated. We weren't very close after the divorce, but he always made an effort. And when he passed, he left behind something I never expected, an inheritance worth $8.5 million, locked in a trust fund that I could only access when I turned 19. At the time, I didn't fully grasp what that money meant. But now, at 19, I was finally old enough to claim it. I had just started settling into college, enjoying a little freedom, adjusting to a new rhythm of life. I was still living at home with my mother and stepfather, Victor, who she had married 6 years ago. I had always tried to be civil with Victor, but there was a coldness about him that never sat right with me. He wasn't abusive or openly mean, just off. And despite my efforts, there was always a layer of tension in the air. Little did I know, that tension was about to explode into something much more dangerous. It was a quiet afternoon. I was in my room, going over my psychology notes for an upcoming exam. The house was unusually still, the kind of silence that made even the soft rustle of paper sound loud. Then came a knock on my door. I looked up. It was Victor, standing there with a serious expression I hadn't seen before. His face was tight, almost unreadable. "Nora, we need to talk," he said. I put my notes aside and followed him to the living room. He sat down on the couch, resting his elbows on his knees. I stayed standing, something in my gut already uneasy. "I know you've recently come into a significant amount of money," he began. "From your father's estate." I didn't respond. I just waited for him to get to the point. "Your stepbrother, Brandon, is in his third year of college. He's been struggling financially. Rachel and I have done what we can, but it's not enough. I think it would be best if you considered giving him a portion of your inheritance. It would really help cover his tuition and expenses." I blinked, caught completely off guard. Brandon was 21, barely spoke to me, and never once acted like we were family. Now Victor expected me to just hand over part of my future? "I'm sorry," I said slowly, trying to keep my tone calm, "but that money was left to me for a reason. I have plans. School, housing, savings. I've worked hard to be responsible with it. I don't think giving it away is the right thing." Victor's expression hardened. "You don't understand. This isn't just about you, Nora. It's about family. We've supported you all these years. Helping Brandon is the least you could do." I shook my head. "I'm not trying to be selfish, but I have to think about my own future." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You're being ungrateful. That money could change his life. Don't make me force this issue." His voice had shifted. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a warning. A chill ran through me. "You can't force me to do anything with it," I said firmly. "And I don't want to talk about this anymore right now." As I turned to walk away, his voice came low and sharp behind me. "Don't tell your mother about this conversation. This is between us." I didn't reply, but as I walked back to my room, my heart beat faster. Something about the way he said it. It wasn't just pressure. It felt like a threat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had a feeling Victor's interest in the money wasn't just about helping Brandon. I just didn't know how deep it went, or how dangerous it would become. The next few days felt strange. Victor kept acting like nothing had happened. He was polite, even a little too friendly, but I could feel him watching me, studying me. My mom, Rachel, had no idea about our conversation. She was busy with work, constantly in and out of meetings, trusting Victor to handle everything at home. That made me feel even more uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This wasn't just about helping Brandon. There was a deeper motive, and I needed to find out what it was. So late one night, when everyone was asleep, I made my move. Victor usually left his home office door slightly open. I crept down the hallway, my socks silent against the floor. I slipped inside and turned on his computer monitor. It wasn't password protected. I don't know if that was carelessness or overconfidence. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, just following instinct. His email was open. I scrolled through random folders, expecting nothing. But then I saw a thread labeled C. Just the letter. It stood out. I clicked. And that's when everything changed. The emails were between Victor and someone named Carla. At first, it seemed casual, like two people in a relationship. But then I read further. My hands started to shake. They were planning to divorce my mom, and had been for months. But that wasn't all. There were cryptic references to a deal going through, discussions about needing cash moved quietly, and instructions to clean things up before anyone noticed. Money laundering. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The deeper I read, the darker it got. Carla mentioned people, transactions, fake business accounts. It wasn't just shady. It was criminal. And the worst part? There were subtle mentions of me. Not by name, but enough to know they saw my inheritance as part of their plan. Something about unlocking the trust and timing it right. I quickly pulled out a flash drive I had brought just in case. I copied everything, emails, attachments, financial records. Then I took screenshots on my phone for backup. I wiped the computer clean of any signs I'd been there and slipped quietly back to my room. My mind raced, fear curling in my stomach. Victor didn't just want my money. He was using Brandon as a cover. And worse, he was planning something much bigger. Now I knew for sure. I couldn't trust him. And I had to act before it was too late. By morning, my fear had sharpened into resolve. I couldn't tell my mom yet. Not without more than just screenshots and copied emails. I needed something undeniable, something that showed Victor's intent in his own words. So, I decided to record him. That evening, I waited until both Victor and Brandon were in the living room. The timing felt right. I walked in casually, holding my phone loosely at my side. With a subtle tap, I hit the record button. "Hey," I said, acting neutral. "Can I talk to you guys for a second?" Victor glanced up from his tablet. Brandon didn't even look away from the TV. "What's up?" Victor asked, tone guarded. I sat across from them, staying calm. "I've just been thinking about the inheritance." Victor immediately straightened. "Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of money. I want to be sure I'm making the right decisions." Brandon finally looked up. "It's not like we're asking for all of it, Nora. Just enough to help out." I nodded slowly.
Right.
"But I've also been wondering why now. Why is it so urgent for me to give it up right after I turn 19? Victor's smile was thin. "Because this is when it matters. Brandon needs it now. It's about supporting the family." I leaned in a little. "Or maybe it's about something else." Victor's eyes narrowed, his tone cooling. "What are you getting at?" I shrugged, keeping my voice light. "I've just been reading a lot about people getting pressured into giving up their inheritance. It's made me cautious." Victor stood up. "You need to trust us. We've looked after you, and now it's your turn to look after someone else." He was walking right into it. "I'm just not sure it's the right time," I replied. "Maybe I should talk to Mom." Victor's mood darkened instantly. "I told you this stays between us." Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "Victor." "Not now," he snapped. I ended the recording discreetly as the tension thickened. Then I stood up. "Thanks for the talk." Back in my room, I played the audio. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was clear. Victor trying to manipulate me, telling me not to involve Mom, pressuring me to give money. It was a start. I labeled the file and saved it securely. Between that and the emails, I was starting to build something real. But I still didn't know how deep Victor's plans went, or what he might do if he realized I was one step ahead. The more I uncovered, the more I realized I wasn't just dealing with greed. This was bigger, riskier, and if I wanted to stop it, I had to see the full picture. So, when Victor told my mom he was heading out for a business meeting that Saturday afternoon, I followed him. I waited a few minutes after he pulled out of the driveway, then grabbed my keys and tailed him in my car. I kept a safe distance, heart pounding, trying to stay out of sight. We drove out of the suburbs past downtown Seattle and into the industrial edge of the city, where things looked worn, quiet, and a little forgotten. Eventually, he pulled into the lot of an old warehouse surrounded by chain-link fence and rusted dumpsters. It didn't look like a business meeting location. It looked like a drop-off point in a bad movie. I parked a few spaces down and crouched low, peering through the windshield. Victor got out of his car with a black briefcase and approached a side entrance. Moments later, someone opened the door, Carla. I recognized her from a photo in one of the emails. She was younger than Victor, sharp features, and dressed in a sleek black coat. They didn't hug. They didn't smile. It was all business. They slipped inside, and the door shut behind them. I stayed put for almost 2 hours, my nerves stretched tight. When Victor finally came out again, his expression was hard and unreadable. He walked quickly to his car, looking around as if expecting to be followed. He didn't see me. I waited until he drove off before snapping a few photos of the building, the address, and the exterior signage that read Nova Storage and Shipping Incorporated. I knew I had to dig deeper into this so-called company. Back home, I added the warehouse location and photos to my growing file of evidence. I also started searching online for any record of Nova Storage. Nothing came up, at least nothing legitimate. It was likely a front. The puzzle was coming together. But I needed someone else to see it, someone who could do more than I could alone. And there was only one person I could trust with that. I didn't want to go to Brandon. He had always kept his distance, cold, quiet, detached. But I knew he was close to Victor, and I had a feeling he knew more than he was letting on. So, the next morning, while my mom was still out of town and Victor had stepped out for errands, I found Brandon in the kitchen making coffee. He looked up as I entered, clearly not expecting conversation. "What's up?" I leaned against the counter, keeping my tone light. "I just wanted to talk. No tension." He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. "I know you and Victor think I'm being selfish about the inheritance," I started, watching his reaction. "But I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. And I just want to understand what's really going on." Brandon stayed silent, sipping from his mug. I continued. "I mean, helping family is one thing. But there's more going on here, isn't there? This isn't just about tuition. It's about something else. Something you don't want to admit." His jaw tightened. "We've been through this." "No," I said firmly. "We haven't. I know about Carla. I know about the warehouse. And I know about the money laundering." That got his attention. He turned sharply toward me, voice suddenly sharp. "You're way out of line." I didn't flinch. "Am I?" "Because I've seen the emails. The transactions. I've followed Victor. I know what he's doing. And I know you've been helping him." His face went pale for a second before he quickly masked it. "You don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Brandon," I said, more quietly. "I'm not your enemy. But if you keep protecting him, you're going down with him." He put his mug down hard on the counter and stepped closer. "You need to back off. You think you're smart, but you're just a kid with a trust fund. You have no idea what kind of people you're messing with." His words weren't just offensive, they were threatening. But he had confirmed everything I needed to know. Brandon was involved. Whether out of loyalty or fear, he was in this deep. And now I had no doubt. I needed to tell my mom everything. The only question was, would she believe me? That night, I couldn't sleep. The confrontation with Brandon had left me rattled. The way he spoke, it was clear now. He wasn't just a bystander. He was in on it. Maybe not at the center of it like Victor, but involved enough to stay quiet. Complicit. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. So I called my mom. It was almost midnight, but I didn't care. She picked up after the second ring, her voice groggy but alert. "Nora? Is everything okay?" "No, Mom," I said quietly. "I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about Victor and the inheritance." There was a pause. Then, "What happened?" "Not over the phone," I said. "But I need you to promise me something. Just listen to me tonight. Don't defend him. Don't get angry. Just listen." Another pause. Then she sighed. "All right. I'm listening. I took a deep breath, then started laying it all out. Everything. The night Victor asked for the money. The hidden emails.
Carla.
The warehouse. The secret recordings. Even the conversation with Brandon. There were long stretches of silence as I spoke. But I kept going, voice steady, walking her through the timeline and what I'd uncovered. When I finished, there was a moment of nothing, just a quiet breath on the other end of the line. Then she whispered, "I don't even know what to say." "I know it's hard to believe," I said softly. "But I have all the proof. Screenshots, files, even photos of the warehouse. He's not who you think he is, Mom." "I need to see it," she said finally. "All of it." "You will." There was a sharpness in her voice now. The hesitation had turned to resolve. "I'm coming home early. And I'm hiring someone to look into this. If Victor is doing what you're saying, then he's going to pay for it." A wave of relief hit me.
She believed me.
And now I wasn't alone anymore. Mom came back 2 days later. She didn't tell Victor in advance, just showed up unexpectedly, her travel bag still slung over one shoulder as she walked into the house. Her expression was tight, unreadable, but I saw the flicker of worry in her eyes when she looked at me. We waited until Victor left to run errands, again before she sat down with me in the living room. "Show me everything," she said. I did. The emails, the screenshots, the voice recording, the photos of the warehouse, the digital trail of transfers between Victor and Carla's fake business accounts. Everything I'd collected over the past week was now laid out for her to see. By the time I finished, she looked like the air had been knocked out of her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the screen, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "All this time." "Mom," I said gently, "you didn't know. That's not your fault." She blinked, nodded slowly, then straightened her shoulders. "I'm hiring a private investigator. Someone neutral. Someone professional. If what you found is real, and I believe it is, we need to make sure it sticks." By the end of the day, Kate Harper, a retired detective-turned-private investigator, arrived at our home. She was sharp-eyed, calm, and all business. "I'm going to need everything you have," she told me. "And I'll do some digging of my own. If this man is involved in money laundering, it won't take long to connect the dots." Kate began tracking Victor's movements. She visited the warehouse, blending in with the surrounding industrial workers. She reviewed business registration records, looked up Carla's background, and even found a link between one of the fake companies and a flagged account under Victor's name. Meanwhile, the air at home grew heavier. Victor started noticing my quietness. He'd ask probing questions. Sometimes he'd linger in doorways longer than necessary. Brandon was tense too, avoiding me altogether. But we said nothing. We waited. We gathered more. Within a week, Kate returned with a thick folder. "You were right," she told us. "Victor and Carla are deeply involved in laundering money through multiple fake businesses. There are even some hints at drug trafficking connections, but we'd need law enforcement to confirm that." I looked at my mom. She was silent, staring down at the evidence. Then she said, "We confront him tonight." That evening, the air inside the house was so thick with tension, it felt like it might crack. Victor and Brandon were sitting in the living room when Mom and I walked in, Kate close behind us, carrying the folder of evidence. Victor glanced up, confused by the way we stood, united and purposeful. Mom was the one to speak first. Her voice was calm, but each word struck like a hammer. "Victor, we need to talk. Right now." He leaned back slowly, eyeing us.
"About what?"
Kate stepped forward and placed the folder on the coffee table. "About your illegal dealings. About Carla. About the money laundering. And the fake companies you set up to move funds under the radar." Brandon stiffened. Victor didn't blink. "You're all out of your minds," he said with a tight smile. "This is absurd." "No," Mom replied, cold and steady. "It's over. The investigator has proof. So does Nora. And if you think you're walking away from this, you're wrong." Victor stood up. "You think you can ambush me in my own house? With accusations? You ungrateful." "We have emails," I said, cutting him off. Screenshots. Conversations. Photos. You've been laundering money and using my inheritance as part of your plan. For a second, Victor froze, like the weight of the truth had finally settled. But then, something in his expression snapped. His face twisted in rage. "You should have kept your mouth shut," he growled. And before anyone could react, he lunged toward the corner of the room, grabbing the heavy wooden cane he usually used for hiking, a thick, polished stick with a steel tip. He turned and swung it violently at me. Crack. The stick slammed against the side of my head, just above my ear. The impact sent me crashing to the floor. My vision blurred instantly. I could hear Mom scream. Blood trickled down the side of my face, warm and fast. "Nora." Mom dropped to her knees beside me. But Kate didn't hesitate. She pulled out her badge and stepped in front of Victor. "Back off. I'm a licensed investigator, and you've just committed felony assault." Victor, breathing heavily, was still holding the stick, shocked at what he'd just done. "Rachel, call 911.
Now."
Kate barked. My mom was already dialing. Victor dropped the stick, muttering, "This is a setup." She provoked me. But there was no covering it up now. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the house. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Officers stormed in. Kate handed over the folder of evidence and her report. My mom pointed to the stick. The officers saw the blood on my head and the panic in her eyes. Victor was arrested on the spot. Brandon tried to intervene, but the officers separated him too. One of them looked at me, barely conscious, still bleeding, and radioed for paramedics. As they cuffed Victor and read him his rights, I watched from the floor, dizzy and dazed, but relieved. He was going down, and I had survived. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. I was fading in and out of awareness, the pain in my head pounding with every heartbeat. My mom stayed close, clutching my hand tightly as the EMTs lifted me onto the stretcher. Kate spoke to the officers while handing over the last of the evidence. Everything moved in a blur, sirens, flashing lights, the rush of the emergency room. At the hospital, I was immediately taken for a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. The doctors confirmed I had a mild concussion and a deep gash on the side of my head. The wound required 8 stitches, and I was put on 4 fluids for dizziness and dehydration. They monitored me for several hours to ensure there were no signs of neurological damage. Mom sat beside my bed the entire time, holding a cold compress to my forehead and whispering that everything was going to be okay. Despite the pain and exhaustion, I believed her. A nurse gave us a printed copy of the medical report, clearly documenting the blunt force trauma and location of injury. It would serve as critical legal evidence of Victor's violent assault. The hospital social worker also visited my room, making sure I felt safe and emotionally stable. She offered trauma counseling and wrote a report to be forwarded to the police. I nodded gratefully. I wanted every piece of this documented. By the next morning, the swelling had begun to go down. I was discharged with a bandage around my head, pain medication, and strict rest instructions. But more importantly, I walked out with proof. Victor had crossed the line from manipulation to violence. And now, there was no going back for him. The moment I was stable, Mom and Kate helped file the full legal case against Victor. The charges stacked up fast. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, money laundering, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, intentional manipulation and coercion regarding the inheritance, and potentially drug-related offenses, pending further investigation into the warehouse. The evidence we provided, emails, financial documents, the recorded conversation, the photos of the warehouse, and now the hospital report detailing the head injury, made the case rock solid. Brandon was also called in for questioning. Though he hadn't physically harmed anyone, his involvement in the financial side of things couldn't be ignored. He was charged with aiding and abetting criminal activity and faced the possibility of a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Victor. The trial began 3 weeks later.
It was surreal sitting in the courtroom.
Victor sat at the defense table, looking nothing like the confident man I had once known. He looked smaller, older, cornered. When I was called to testify, I walked to the stand with the bandage still visible under my hairline. I told the court everything, from the moment he demanded money to the night he struck me. The prosecutor presented every piece of evidence with surgical precision. Kate testified as a licensed investigator. Rachel spoke about the betrayal and what it had done to her trust. And the hospital's medical report was read aloud by the attending physician. Victor's defense tried to argue that the assault had been an accident during an argument, but the photographs, the stick, and my injury disproved that easily. Brandon, visibly shaken, eventually confessed to his part in helping Victor set up dummy businesses and moving money discreetly. His cooperation helped the case move faster. The jury didn't take long to decide. Victor was found guilty on all major counts. The judge, acknowledging the severity of both the financial crimes and the violent assault, sentenced him to 18 years in prison with no chance of early release. Carla was later arrested based on additional evidence, and Brandon received 2 years probation, community service, and a permanent mark on his record. Watching Victor being led away in handcuffs, I didn't feel joy. I felt closure. He wouldn't hurt us again. And justice had been served, not just for me, but for my mother and for every person who had ever been manipulated into silence. After the sentencing, the house felt different, quieter, lighter. Victor's presence had always cast a shadow, but now that shadow was gone. For the first time in years, Mom and I could breathe freely in our own home. She filed for divorce immediately after the trial. The process was quick, given the criminal charges. Once finalized, Rachel looked like a different person, relieved, steady, and finally in control of her life again. Brandon moved out shortly after the sentencing. He didn't say goodbye, and I didn't expect him to. He'd made his choices. Whether he regretted them or not was no longer my concern. Mom and I spent the next few months focusing on recovery. She took a leave from work, and I lightened my class load. We started having real conversations about life, about trust, and about everything that had been broken between us but could still be rebuilt. Our bond, once frayed and distant, became our greatest strength. Some nights, we sat on the porch drinking tea, just talking, something we hadn't done since before the divorce. Other times, we laughed over little things like movie nights or terrible takeout. It wasn't about pretending everything was perfect. It was about finding joy again in the smallest places. I went to therapy to help deal with the trauma, both emotional and physical. The sessions helped me understand that what happened to me wasn't my fault, and that speaking up, even when it was terrifying, was the strongest thing I could have done. Mom encouraged me to start looking ahead again. I returned to school full-time and started a small scholarship project in my father's name for girls pursuing business and finance. It felt like a meaningful way to honor him and to use the inheritance for good, the way he would have wanted. Looking back, I sometimes ask myself what would have happened if I had stayed silent, if I had given in, if I had just handed over the money and ignored the warning signs. But I didn't. And that changed everything. I stood up, not just for myself, but for the truth. I protected my future, exposed the lies, and helped put a criminal behind bars. My name is Nora, and I may have been 19, but I learned a lifetime's worth of lessons. Trust your instincts. Speak up. And never let fear silence what you know is right. If my story moved you, or made you think about the importance of speaking up for yourself, then please let me know. I've shared a part of my life that wasn't easy to live through, but I hope it inspires someone out there who might be going through something similar. Don't forget to like this video if you felt connected to it, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more real-life stories that speak from the heart. Your support helps more than you know. Thank you for watching.